name is Judith Rosenbaum. I am the Executive Director of the Jewish Women's Archive, and I want to welcome you all here today. It is really wonderful to have a room full of these amazing young women and their families, all of you, and staff and friends of the Jewish Women's Archive. For those of you who have not yet caught on to what JWA is beyond the Rising Voices Fellowship, I want to share that we are a national organization that is devoted to collecting and promoting the stories of Jewish women, both the unheralded and the already celebrated. We really explore the past as a way to understand the issues that matter to us today. And we are devoted to expanding the range of role models that are available to us. And we use Jewish women's stories to excite people of all genders and all backgrounds to see themselves as agents of change. And I can think of no better sign of that than these women here who have been exciting all of us this year with amazing ideas and insights and digging through the archives to pull out stories of women who inspire them. There are many ways to get involved with JWA. There's some more information in a little insert in your program, so I urge you to check that out and see if there are other ways that you would like to be involved. We'll probably remind you about that again. Of all the programs that JWA does for nearly 2 million users a year around the world, I have to say that the Rising Voices Fellowship is really one of my very, very favorites. As much as JWA exists to honor women of the past, it exists even more so to inspire and challenge and motivate and animate the women of our future. And that you fellows, Rising Voices Fellows, are the history makers of the present and the future. And we look to you to be our partners in doing this work and leading us forward. I can say that personally, even just in the small amount of time that I've spent with each of you at our retreats and at the webinar that I was honored to lead, I've really learned from all of you and from your writing about the issues that matter now and that matter to you and that you're helping us understand better, and the issues that we need to be working on, the work we need to be doing to ensure that Jewish women can bring our deepest selves and our insights to our many diverse communities and to the work that we need to do in the world. And we know that there is a lot of it. Before we get started today with our full program, I wanted to share with you one of our favorite texts at JWA, which comes from Rosa Sonnenschein, who was the publisher of The American Jewess, which was the first English language publication for American Jewish women, which was published from 1895 to 1899. And JWA digitized it about 15 years ago, and you can explore it on our site. And I encourage you to do that because it's really an amazing collection. It runs the gamut from pieces about whether or why women should be allowed to ride bicycles, to the nascent Zionist movement of that period, to fashion, to membership for women in synagogues, which was not allowed at that point. And it really was created to explore and help define this new identity of American Jewish womanhood. And I think that's very similar to the work that you all have been doing this year, thinking about what does this mean to be an American Jewish woman in the 21st century. I also want to point out that the American Jewess had a circulation of about 31,000 at its height, and that is almost as much of a readership as you all have had this year in your posts. So I mention that because it's very close to your own readership, which I think this year so far has been about 35,000. So to get back to Rosa Sonnenschein, she wrote in her first editorial, "Not what has happened, but what is recorded makes history." Not what has happened, but what is recorded makes history. She very much understood, and this is why she was devoted to creating a place for Jewish women to write and to publish. She understood that the stories and experiences that are not documented become invisible and are lost to the larger narrative and to the future. So she insisted that Jewish women should speak up and should record their ideas and their debates, not only for themselves, but also for all the people who would come after them, and so that they could shape the conversations in their communities and then be part of that history. JWA very much exists to make and remake history by documenting and elevating the stories of Jewish women and helping us all to understand the past differently, to change our understanding of the past, of ourselves, of what we are able to do in the world, and the future that we can make together. And your work this year, your work recording your own experiences and ideas and the stories of the women that you've encountered along the way, whether they're living people in your own communities and families or women that you've encountered through the archive, that really enriches the work that we're doing at JWA and helps to carry it forward. So I want to thank you all for contributing to the Jewish Women's Archive and to the shared understanding of history that we are trying to put forth in the world. I want to thank all your families for supporting you in this work and for schlepping to Newton today. And just to thank everybody here for being together and for being part of this community. Thank you very much. Call Larissa, who I'm pretending you are. You've blended into the young women in the audience. Larissa is, I can't say enough good things about Larissa and the amazing work she does at JWA with the Rising Voices Fellowship, with our educators and our programs. And we just feel so lucky that you are part of the JWA community. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Things happening. You're always a tough act to follow, which I guess is a good thing for JWA. So my name is Larissa. I'm the program manager at the Jewish Women's Archive, and I have the distinct honor of getting to work really closely with our Rising Voices Fellows throughout the year. So I wanted to tell you a little story. So about a year ago, my colleague Mickey, our Director of Programs and Education, and I were at this Jewish education conference in the Chicago area. And one of the days of the conference, we went to this young professionals lunch, because we're obviously both very young professionals. And we were at this lunch, and the woman leading the discussion said that one of the things that kind of annoys her about how people talk about young professionals is that it's very much focused on the future, that we are the future leaders, the future of Jewish education. And she said, yes, that's true. Like, we are the future, but we're also the present. We're also right now. We're also doing really important work in this moment that is shaping our field. And this is something that has really stayed with me because it applies so strongly to our Rising Voices Fellows. The Rising Voices Fellowship is a leadership development program. We bring together young Jewish women from all over the country to discuss and write about Jewish feminist identity, the feminist movement, social justice and activism, the influence of pop culture, politics, maybe this year especially politics. And of course, the intention is to cultivate tomorrow's Jewish leaders. And I have no doubt that our fellows will continue to grow and develop into the Jewish feminist leaders of tomorrow, but I feel it's very important to say that they're also the Jewish feminist leaders of today, and they're already doing such important work in writing about the issues that are important to them, and being what we like to call thought leaders and convening conversations amongst themselves, online, and in their communities. I look forward, and I know that later on I'll be able to say that I knew them when, but I'm so proud to know them now. I was gonna wait to cry till later, but apparently that's not happening. And I just wanna say to the fellows, I'm just so proud of each and every one of you, and I feel honored that I got to work with all of you this year. Oh my God, hi. So without further ado, we're really here today to hear from our fellows, and I'm really excited for everyone who is here to get to partake in listening to our fellows read excerpts from some of their favorite blog posts throughout the year. So I'm going to go ahead and invite up our first pair. They'll also be introducing each other as they go. Enjoy.
So over the course of this past year, I've had the privilege of being Molly's peer editor, and she's such a friendly and warm person, and I definitely learned something new from each of her blog posts, and I've also loved speaking out with her about theater. So here's Molly.
We light candles in the quickly falling darkness and sing the Havdalah prayers. A large group of people stands in a circle in a white tent with a dirt floor. As we sing, I look around and see people with different backgrounds and interests and lives than mine. Despite these differences, I know that we are all connected by a shared religion and a shared passion for food justice. This memory is from the Hazon Food Conference, which I attended as a 7th grader. My family and I had always been passionate about food and food justice, so I decided that for my bat mitzvah project, I would found a community-supported agriculture (CSA) program at my temple. CSA is a system in which customers pay a deposit in exchange for weekly bags of fresh vegetables, giving farmers more financial security and the customer a steady supply of healthy, environmentally friendly, and in-season produce. I arrived at the Hazon conference having no idea what to expect. I left with a jar of homemade sauerkraut, a handbook on how to start a CSA, and the newfound knowledge that my religion was not just something that had been handed down to me from my parents, but also something that I could make my own. To me, food has always held an important place in my idea of Judaism, but what Hazon helped me to discover is that on some deeper level, a meal can be a spiritually fulfilling experience as well. So it's no wonder that we have so many laws about what we can and cannot eat, and that we celebrate so many holidays by gathering together for a meal. I was raised with the values of food justice just as much as I was raised with the values of Judaism. It wasn't until my bat mitzvah project and the Hazon Food Conference, though, that I really started to notice how these important threads in my life could be woven together. Taking part in the Hazon Food Conference helped me realize that from food justice to feminism, Judaism can be a lens through which I view all the different pieces that make up who I am. Our next fellow, Maya, is enthusiastic and articulate about everything she does, from biology to her social science groups. She even designed our awesome RVF sweatshirts and taught me, a person with 2 left feet, to do Israeli dancing. She has brought so much passion and fearlessness to our cohort and will make an amazing addition to Barnard College, where she'll be attending next fall.
The recent presidential election proved that women haven't broken the highest glass ceiling just yet. For centuries, however, women have been breaking barriers and surmounting obstacles. In one of the first recorded cases, 5 revolutionary biblical women were the first females to inherit land from their father, Zelophehad. In this story, Zelophehad's daughters countered an oppressive law that allowed only men to inherit land from their fathers. They fought their case in front of Moses, Eleazar the priest, their community, and its leaders, by arguing that they should be able to inherit their father's land so that the Zelophehad name would not be lost. Moses consulted God, and God told him that the daughter's wish should be granted. Zelophehad's daughters faced many obstacles in their fight for land ownership. Likewise, Hillary Clinton faced many barriers during her campaign. Like many liberals after the election, I was dumbfounded by Trump's victory. I genuinely could not understand how people could vote for someone with minimal political experience, when Clinton was arguably the most qualified presidential candidate in our nation's history. The story of Zelophehad's daughters relates to Clinton's campaign on many levels. The daughters were the first to fight the land ownership law, and Clinton was the first female to win a presidential nomination by a major party in the US. The daughters, while winning the right to inherit land, also lost in some ways because they were still forced to marry within their tribe. Similarly, Clinton, though surpassing many obstacles and getting farther than any women had gotten before, ultimately lost the election. Even though Zelophehad's daughters did not get everything they hoped for, and even though Clinton's inspiring campaign did not result in a victory, we should not give up. There's no question that we've come far since the days of Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. We should take inspiration from their battle and continue marching forward in the pursuit of total equality for all. I'm so happy to introduce Lily. Lily is always there to answer my writing questions or to give me some really helpful life advice. I'm so grateful to have met her, and I'm excited to see all the amazing things she will do in the future. Without further ado, here's Lily.
It doesn't seem to matter if you have a PhD in neuroscience. That won't stop some man from assuming that you are ignorant on the subject and carefully explaining what he learned in his high school bio class. This quote from an article by Lily Fain, published on Bustle, perfectly explains the art of mansplaining. The term mansplaining describes instances when a man when a man explains something to a woman in a patronizing manner. This phenomenon has become such a common occurrence in our society that it's no wonder we needed a word to describe it. I've recently noticed how often mansplaining occurs in my daily life. One of the most memorable instances consisted of one of my male peers telling me that mansplaining doesn't actually exist, and it's just another way that women target men. This boy was mansplaining the concept of mansplaining to me. Needless to say, I took some time to think about the irony. Another time, a boy in one of my classes interrupted me while I was explaining something and told me that he could explain the subject more effectively than I could. Now, he probably didn't even know that what he was doing was problematic, but that's another piece of the issue. Going back to the Bustle article, Lily Fain sheds light on yet another aspect of mansplaining. She explains, when someone starts mansplaining, it can make you feel trapped. There are two choices. Either you call the guy out on his condescending behavior and risk being rude, or you have to wait until he's done with his uninformed diatribe. In other words, mansplaining has a fight or flight effect. You can engage or you can choose to stay silent. As someone who has experimented with both fight and flight, I've come to realize that both usually fail. Mansplaining is a deeply ingrained societal issue. Many things fuel this ideology, such as the wage gap, companies that hire more men than women, as well as the patriarchal nature of our society as a whole. Mansplaining is a big issue in its own, but it's only one part of a larger ideology that's dismantling, and it's long overdue. Throughout the course of the year, I've had the privilege of having Eliza as my peer editor. As we've sent draft after draft to one another, I've come to know her as a lively and empowering woman, but more importantly, I've come to know her as a lively, empowering writer, but more importantly, a lively and empowering woman.
You may be uncomfortable reading a blog post about a vibrator entrepreneur written by a 16-year-old, but bear with me. Alexandra Fine, along with Janet Lieberman, founded Dave, a company whose mission is to design well-engineered sex toys to heighten intimacy and to openly empower the sexual experiences of womankind. Beyond their revolutionary products, Dave's mission contradicts so many mainstream notions of sex, like the idea that sex cannot be an intimate act. You may be thinking, intimate sex is revolutionary? But unfortunately, for many teenagers, it is. 89% of teenagers learn about sex through the internet, mostly in the form of pornography, which is devoid of tenderness. Some might point to parents and schools as two entities that should step in to help. But no one wants to talk to their parents about sex, and given that only 13 of 50 states require that accurate information about sex be taught in school, it's no wonder that the internet remains the predominant source of information about sex for teenagers. Even good sex education curriculum often leaves out pleasure, a main motivation for sex. The fact that pleasure varies so much person to person, combined with the potential discomfort of sharing such a personal sentiment, makes it complicated to teach about pleasure. Therefore, most sex ed just avoids discussing it. There's still a widespread assumption, deeply ingrained in our society, that men find sexual interactions pleasurable while women don't. Without other resources, girls can be left feeling that their satisfaction is secondary or even that it is unimportant. By contrast, Fine believes that sexually satisfying relationships can be empowering and has made this satisfaction more attainable for women. She helps women walk through the path of sexual and self-discovery. By having open discussions about vibrators, Fine helps young women, whether sexually active or not, think about their needs and feel that it is their right to have them met. It has been a pleasure this past year to work alongside Tess. It was particularly striking at our first retreat how giggly and happy-go-lucky she is. I have learned this year that Tess is profoundly thoughtful, but in a low-key way. She also strikes a balance of self-possessed confidence and humility that is so admirable.
When you think of Cleveland, your mind may jump to an NBA miracle or a heated Republican convention or the stereotype of the industrial mistake on the lake. You probably do not know that Cleveland has been the site of a West Side Story-like conflict for centuries. Nearly 200 years ago, residents of the west side of Cleveland destroyed the bridge that connected the banks of the Cuyahoga River, separating themselves from East Cleveland and intending to become their own city. Since then, we rebuilt the bridge and stayed as one city, but we still haven't gotten over our differences. Many cities have a friendly rivalry between opposing suburbs, but I don't believe there's one as vicious or long-standing as the dichotomy of Cleveland, Ohio. My family, however, travels across the river weekly, bridging the gap that is so ingrained into our city's history. I live in Orange, a Cleveland suburb securely on the east side, which has a large Jewish community, including 38 synagogues and 5 Jewish day schools. But my mother is a rabbi who works at Temple B'nai Abraham, or TVA, a tiny Reform temple in Elyria, a small city just west of the west side. In 7th grade, the year of B'nai Mitzvah at my Jewish school, everyone was having lavish parties with DJs and themes, and I'd been planning a service much like theirs at an East Side Reform temple, with lots of other kids, preparing to be just like everybody else. But all of their services started to look the same to me, long and without personality. And I attended TVA on Friday nights and felt more spiritually connected than I did anywhere else. I told my mother that I wanted to have my bat mitzvah in Elyria, and I thought that that's where it had to be. She was worried about logistics, but she was thrilled that I felt at home there. And there I was able to write my own service, lead my favorite camp songs, and joke with the congregation when I made a mistake instead of being embarrassed. Nobody crosses from the east to the west or the west to the east, but I do it all the time. And sometimes our hearts take us in directions that our community might see as wrong or taboo, but we must pursue what we love and what we believe, building bridges between our identities. I've gotten to know Isabel over this past year, and it has been an amazing roller coaster ride. She is so bubbly and fun, and yet somehow really, really brilliant and insightful as well. And even over webinars and over the internet, she still manages to emit this really happy and wonderful personality. You're really awesome.
Clinical descriptions of eating disorders date back centuries, yet it took until the 1970s for the pioneering research of doctor, psychologist, and writer Hilde Bruch to bring the issue to public attention. Born in Germany in 1904, she received her doctorate in medicine in 1929 and practiced in Germany until fleeing to London in 1933 and to New York soon thereafter. Beginning in the early 1940s, Bruch conducted groundbreaking research on childhood obesity and eating disorders, especially anorexia nervosa. I was struck by the fact that Bruch was asking the same questions more than 70 years ago that are still asked now. How and why are so many young women affected by eating disorders? What can we do to prevent them? Today, research into eating disorders still lags behind in funding when compared to other psychiatric illnesses. This year, an estimated $251 million will be spent on schizophrenia-related research in the United States, compared to around $32 million focusing on eating disorders. Why don't eating disorders get more attention in the world of medical research? A possible answer may stem from the historic belief that eating disorders are simply the result of vanity and not real diseases. But this view is misguided. Women face intense social pressure to be impossibly thin. The result of this pressure is the body insecurity that we see in younger and younger girls that can eventually lead to eating disorders. Despite Bruch's groundbreaking work, eating disorders in teenagers, predominantly girls, are certainly not just an issue of the past. As a competitive runner, I am well aware of the danger and the prevalence of eating disorders among teenage girls. I am terrified of the threat that eating disorders pose to me and to my teammates. I do my best to honor Bruch's legacy by analyzing the messages that are marketed to me, by looking out for my friends and teammates who may be struggling with their eating habits, and by not criticizing my or anyone else's body. I know that these actions are minimal, but they're a step in the right direction toward breaking the power of socially constructed norms about women's bodies. So I now have the honor of introducing Katie. She is not only assertive and articulate, but Katie is also one of the funniest people that I have ever met. and she has the perfect comment for any situation and is also remarkably able to make everyone feel comfortable and at ease just by being around her. So I'm delighted to have you hear her piece.
What do you do when you get your period? For most of us, the answer is probably pop a painkiller, put on a period product, and go about our daily lives. The Torah, however, specifically Leviticus chapter 15, has very different ideas about a woman's life during menstruation. When a woman has her regular flow of blood, the impurity of her monthly period will last 7 days, and anyone who touches her will be unclean till evening. Anything she lies on during her period will be unclean, and anything will be unclean. It goes on, but you get the idea. These rules are called nidah or purity laws, and I find them to be oppressive towards women. It's disheartening to me that our religious text calls something as natural as a woman's period impure. A period is nothing to be ashamed of, and this text only adds to the stigma surrounding them. This is why I struggle with the concept of the mikveh. The mikveh is an important part of nidah laws because post-period purification is achieved through immersion. When I was in 7th grade, I went to the mikveh at Mayim Hayim before becoming bat mitzvah. It was a wonderful and spiritual moment in my religious life, and I truly felt connected to Judaism. Despite the fact that mikveh was born out of nidah, I strongly believe in their potential to provide positive and transformative experiences. So how does the often oppressive nidah coexist with my beautiful experience at the mikveh? Is it possible to have honest, affirming Jewish moments like the one I had at the mikveh while also maintaining feminist sensibilities? I believe this balance is possible because I believe you can choose what things mean to you. I do not feel impure after my period. However, there are times in my life when I feel spiritually impure. To me, the mikveh is an experience that washes away the grime of the day-to-day and brings me closer to God. I believe that reclamation is very important for Jewish feminists dealing with the often oppressive nature of the Bible. In my life, the mikveh means spiritual purification that connects me to Judaism. It's not easy to reclaim practices that may seem archaic, but through this process, I am able to reconcile traditional Jewish text with my feminist ideals. So there's a lot of things I can say about Hannah. I can talk about her beautiful singing voice, or her awesome writing, or her on-point eyeliner. But one thing, yesterday as Hannah was leading the Havdalah service, I realized that to me, Hannah is like the Shabbos candles. She is such a comforting presence. Her smile and the way she speaks makes everyone feel loved and connected. And like the light of the Shabbos candles, as she led us in prayer and as we talked, it made the room feel special and bright and warm.
If there is one thing in the world that I am passionate about, it's my heritage. I was born from the love between a nice Jewish boy from New York and a strong Hispanic woman from Colombia. I am proud to say that I eat both matzo ball soup and ajiaco, a Colombian soup made with chicken and potato. I sing songs by Reformed musician Dan Nichols, as well as Colombian rock star Carlos Vives. I am very proud and comfortable with both of these parts of my identity. But I struggle with the often subtle and mostly unintentional lack of understanding from my peers. A while back, I had a conversation with a boy, let's call him Mark, who definitely didn't recognize this aspect of my identity. He said, totally out of the blue, "So did you hear about what happened in Colombia, that failed peace deal?" Yes, of course I had. Who hadn't? I won't pretend that I know everything about the situation. I've never lived in Colombia or personally witnessed the destruction, fear, and anger that this war had caused for millions of people. However, I had been educated by my mother and my grandmother on the harsh realities of the conflict. When I explained my views to Mark, he scoffed. "How can you know? You're Jewish, right?" I proceeded to inform him of my background and explain that these two identities aren't mutually exclusive. Instead of listening to me, though, he insisted that what I was saying just didn't make sense, and he abruptly ended the conversation. As he walked away, I grew angrier. His short-sighted perception of me had clouded his ability to hear what I had to say. However, I realized that what I needed to do was speak up. I've spent so many conversations on the sidelines because I was scared of how other people would perceive me. But in doing that, I allowed them to create their own distorted images of who I am. I'm a proud Hispanic Jewish woman, and no one gets to erase or demean any part of my unique identity. And if they try, I will speak up. I am so honored to introduce Diana to you all. I've had the pleasure of being her peer editor for the past 10 months, and she's honestly amazing. She's so smart and talented, and she gives the best advice about school and life and memes. And I know she's going to go on and do wonderful things at Harvard next year, and I'm so happy to see where her future takes her.
When I was still pretty small, in first grade or maybe kindergarten, someone gave me a book for my birthday. This wasn't an unusual event. What was unusual was that this book was by a Jewish woman and was about Jewish girls like me. All of a Kind Family is the first in a 5-book series by Sidney Taylor about a large family on the Lower East Side of New York City in the early 20th century. The books are written as a collection of short stories about the daily adventures of 5 Jewish sisters. They go to the candy store, the library, the market, they have trouble in school, they attend Sukkot and Purim parties, they meet people in the neighborhood and bring them home for Shabbat dinner. I read these books over and over when I was in elementary school, and my copies show it. For reasons I couldn't explain at the time, I was intensely drawn to Ella, Henny, Sarah, Charlotte, and Gertie. They were among the few Jewish female characters I had access to, and I cherished them. Lately, there's been an increased call for diversity in media, especially among children's media, because there's much evidence that it's immensely helpful for kids of all backgrounds to understand and appreciate differences. What representation also does is help the different kids, like me, feel less alone. Having access to stories about Jewish girls was incredibly important to minimizing how weird I sometimes felt at school. I still adore the All of a Kind family books, even though I've long since outgrown them. Thanks to Taylor's work that quietly demonstrated just how necessary positive Jewish stories are for young Jews, I know that when I write my own books, I too can weave in themes and characters that will inspire proud Jewish identity among young readers. Now I'd like to introduce Madison, who's super cool. She's dedicated herself to so many different things in her short 18 years. RBF, of course, but also her high school swim team and 2 language classes. She's even going to China for her gap year next year. She's super smart and also a really fun presence in our group chat, and I'm so glad I got to know her this year.
The first week of school this year, the head of school at my boarding high school said the following during a get-to-know-you gathering at my home. You can't just throw around the loaded terms like feminism. You can't just say, I'm a feminist. There are so many implications. Luckily, or perhaps very sadly, I'm used to this misogynistic attitude. My school's atmosphere is curated for the economically privileged, white male. You can almost smell the privilege. Meticulously manicured green lawns connect high-tech academic buildings and an impressive athletic complex. Boys saunter around dressed for success in blazers and ties, while girls are condemned for their never long enough brandy dresses. As a community, we've begun some discussions on gender issues, dress code, and sexism on campus. But it's undeniable that our school's culture strongly favors boys. I've seen the detrimental effects firsthand. Even 2 years after starting the Feminism Club, the social backlash is still significant. From the student body all the way up to our head of school, the environment is hostile. The uninviting atmosphere has made it difficult to embrace my identity as a feminist, but little by little I've become more confident about voicing my opinions, correcting misinformed judgments, and standing up for my beliefs. Our head of school's words struck a deep chord in my feminist self. Sitting in the common room surrounded by girls, I knew they were looking to me, the leader of the Feminism Club, to interject. But I froze. I was dumbfounded. I would understand if upperclassmen boys badmouth feminism. They tend to have the need to silence strong women. But our head of school, the first female to hold this position at my school, what kind of example does that set for new girls on campus? I learned a valuable lesson from this experience. I didn't speak up because I was scared that in my anger, I wouldn't be able to phrase my thoughts correctly and really get to the root of the problem. But now I realize that talking is the most powerful way to call attention to injustices, generalizations, or misinformed misogyny. It's scary sometimes, but it's always better to speak up. After all, you can't fight the patriarchy with your lips sealed. I have the honor of introducing Eden. She's from Newton and she's super cool. She's the girl next door. You want to be your friend. She keeps her chill in our group, kind of grounds us in social media and what's going on with the Kardashians. And she has gorgeous hair that she loves to play with. And she's also going to do a gap year in Israel next year, which I think is super cool. And it's been great getting to know you.
Not many high school students are able to say that they had a spiritual junior year. Usually that year is described with a different S word. However, my pluralistic Jewish high school gives their junior class an opportunity to spend the first trimester in Israel. The journey to Tzfat, one of the cities in Israel, was one that I was looking forward to for a long time. Once we settled into our hostel, one of our teachers told us our plan for Shabbat. The boys were heading to a Kabbalat Shabbat service, while the girls were going to visit a woman who's going to tell us about life as a religious Jew in Tzfat. Now, as much as I love a good autobiography, I love a good Kabbalat Shabbat service even more. Sadly, though, I wasn't being given that option because of my gender. I confronted my teacher about the unfair situation. His response was a curt, "Well, you didn't bring a long skirt, so it doesn't matter anyways." As if being excluded from the services for being a girl wasn't bad enough, now I got told that I couldn't go because I wasn't dressed appropriately. Fantastic. I decided I didn't want to go into Shabbat with a negative attitude, though, so I ignored my irritation and just went with the flow. But after dinner, the night took an unforgivable turn, with the boys and girls going their separate ways again. The boys to a mikveh, a Jewish spiritual purifying bath, and the girls to a room in the hostel to play truth or dare. I was in utter disbelief. I was aware of the gender disparity in Jewish practice, but because I had always been in a pluralistic or egalitarian setting, I had never experienced them as offensively as I did that night. The severity with which I felt excluded from something that I've always taken for granted has opened my eyes to the inequality in my religion. The memory of this disparity is what makes me want to share my opinion and defend my values, so that other girls don't have to feel excluded. Someone coming up for Sarah. Okay, so I am lucky to introduce, even though she's not here, my peer editor, Sarah. She really embodies the Midwestern attitude. She's from Wisconsin. She's like a pure ray of sunshine and politeness. She always has the most like positive words of encouragement, both like on my posts when we edit them and in our group chat. She goes through and reads every single person's new blogs when they go up on the website, and it's really like everyone feels so loved by her. And I'll never forget on the first retreat when I first got there, like within the first 5 seconds, she like gave me a huge hug when she saw me, and I was like, this is one of a kind girl.
So unfortunately, Sarah is not here. She wasn't feeling well this morning and had to go to the doctor. So I'm going to read her post for her, and then I'll also read her introduction of our next fellow. Quote, "I want a commander-in-chief who will ensure that the threat from terrorists does not wash up on American soil. If I can take on 100,000 protesters, I can do the same across the world," end quote. Said my governor, Republican Scott Walker, in February 2015. His bizarre statement equating peaceful protesters and terrorists demonstrates the animosity that remains in Wisconsin between the state government and many state employees over Act 10, a 2011 bill that proposed taking away collective bargaining rights for most public sector employees and slashing their health benefits. In response, tens of thousands of teachers and other state workers mobilized and marched in Madison during the winter, no less. As a sixth grader, I remember being floored by the huge crowds marching 90 miles away from where I live. I saw the power of regular people to organize and protest and receive national attention. Eventually, despite Democratic legislators leaving the state in an attempt to sabotage the bill, Act 10 passed. And now, years after the media has moved on from Act 10, students like me are living with its consequences. When I first discovered the Jewish Women's Archive, my concern and love for my home state led me to immediately look for a fellow Jewish feminist who was a Wisconsinite like I am. I discovered that Elizabeth Brandeis Rauschenbusch, daughter of Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, received her PhD from University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she taught economics. Rauschenbusch studied the history of labor law as a professor and fought to implement legislation in our state that supported workers. My personal experiences with Act 10 led me to see the significance of labor laws and the power government has to promote employees' rights. In the spirit of Rauschenbusch's work, important specific reforms that we should implement include raising the minimum wage and mandating that employers offer paid sick time and paid parental leave. For moral and economic reasons, the government should protect workers' rights, not infringe upon them. From their promotion of income equality to their benefits for children, laws that invest in employees pay off. We owe Elizabeth Brandeis Rauschenbusch a great debt for her contributions to guaranteeing employees' rights. Inspired by her achievements and the actions of Wisconsin public school teachers and Act 10 protesters, I am committed to fighting for fair labor laws. So this is from Sarah to Abby. So Sarah said, Abby is known in our cohort as having the best feminist swag and amazing t-shirts, which is a metaphor for strength for strength of being outspoken and vocal. She's bold, she's engaging, she's funny. She has a strong Jewish and feminist identity, and she is generous about helping you with your Jewish and feminist journeys. When I met Abby, I remember being so impressed with her maturity and not believing that she was only a sophomore. I can't wait to see what she does next. This from Sarah.
Quote, Torah Judaism does not support abortion. Torah Judaism does not support same-sex marriage, end quote. Right-wing pundit Ben Shapiro explained with a confident smirk to a cheering audience of Yeshiva University students. Of the concerning and inaccurate claims Shapiro made during this talk, his comments on transgender individuals were by far the most upsetting. His opinion is that transgender people are, as he puts it, in the unfortunate circumstance of severe mental illness. He then explained that the rabbis and the Torah are very clear on this issue. God creates people in his image, therefore mutilating your body doesn't magically make you a member of the opposite sex, close quote. Personally, I find his view horrifically insensitive and entirely untrue. And to base this view in the Torah and Jewish values degrades Judaism as a whole. Was the Torah Shapiro was reading the same as the one I have on my shelf? My copy has the line, treat others as you would want to be treated. Shapiro and I have widely different stances, largely because our framework for looking at the Torah is fundamentally different. I believe there's a difference between a value and a rule. A rule is there to set a boundary and preserve a value, but the values always supersede the rule. So yeah, the Torah says that homosexuality is an abomination, but it also says justice, justice you will pursue, and other phrases that give weight to our obligation as Jews and as citizens of the world to pursue and uphold justice. Unfortunately, Shapiro sees the rules as unbending while completely disregarding the values. Another catchphrase of Shapiro's is facts don't care about your feelings. And sure, it's true and it's a nice soundbite, but it's not a justification for putting someone down. The core problem is that most of Shapiro's rhetoric is based in theory. Sure, theory is important, but life is not only about abstract concepts. Life is about the way we treat each other. Truthfully, Ben Shapiro is right. Facts don't care about your feelings, but guess what? People do.
Wow. It's really exciting for me to hear all of your thoughts again and these excerpts from these pieces, even though I've read them before, to hear them in your own voices is amazing. And also to know some of the ways in which some of the pieces that you wrote went on to have influence in your own communities and continue to spark conversation and change in your communities. I know you'll continue to do that, which is amazing. I also have to say that as much as I love your pieces, I also love your introductions for each other. And I think that that's another really important component of the Rising Voices Fellowship from our perspective, and I know from yours too, is just the kind of community that you create and the way that you learn how to support each other and learn to find and build female community and feminist community. And my hope for you all is that you will continue to have that with each other and continue to build that and find strength in that as you move forward in the world. And as many of you said to each other, I can't wait to see what you do next. And we certainly all feel that way at JWA and are excited to remain in contact with you and have you be involved with us. Now I have the great honor of introducing our keynote speaker for today. Jacqueline Friedman is a writer and speaker and activist. She is the author of some hit books like Yes Means Yes, which I know some of you have read and you all should read, Visions of Female Sexual Power in a World Without Rape, which was one of Publisher Weekly's top 100 books of 2009 and number 11 on Ms. Magazine's top 100 feminist nonfiction of all time. And she's also the author of What You Really, Really Want, The Smart Girl's Shame-Free Guide to Sex and Safety. Jacqueline is also the host of the podcast Unscrewed, which I love, a podcast exploring paths to sexual liberation. She was a guest on JWA's podcast, Can We Talk, about Jewish hair. And she is at work on a book also called Unscrewed, which we are eagerly anticipating, and which I can give you a little sneak peek is going to be one of JWA's book club picks in the coming year. Jacqueline is a longtime activist against sexual assault and a leading advocate of the Yes Means Yes standard of sexual consent that is quickly becoming law on many campuses. She is a founder and former executive director of Women Action in the Media, where she led the successful #Facebook rape campaign to apply Facebook's hate speech ban to content that promotes gender-based violence. Jacqueline is a very popular speaker on many campuses and shows. I encourage those of you who are talking about sexism on your campus to consider inviting her as a speaker for your feminist clubs. I'm not even going to list all the places where she's published and spoken, but we invited her today not only because we totally admire and worship her, but also because she's really an amazing role model for how to use writing as a tool for social change. And we're really honored to have her here with us today.
You know, when I said yes to this, I didn't realize I was going to follow all of you. I was asked to give some remarks about the power. Is it me? It's sorry. The power of words to change the world, but I honestly don't know that I have to school y'all in very much. So I'm just going to share some reflections of what I've experienced, but maybe take them as a peer, speaking to other peers, because I absolutely am floored by listening to all y'all and the power of your words and your voices and your confidence in them and your bold visions. And I'm just honestly I'm just full of feeling. And part of that feeling honestly comes from growing up as the girl that everyone would constantly tell to be quiet. I just was a loud, opinionated girl. I had a loud laugh. My mother was always like, shh, you're disturbing everyone. And what I like to say now is, you know, like I figured out how to make a career out of that, right? I figured out how to make a life out of that. And it seems like you all are well on your way to figuring that out too. So the first thing I want to say is like, never let someone make you feel bad for being mouthy. Own it. Own your opinions and your vision and speak as loudly as you feel confident to speak, sometimes a little louder than you have the confidence. Sometimes that's how you earn the confidence. I'm sorry, I had like a whole bunch of remarks planned out, but I'm just like so blown away by you guys. And I'm not sure what you can learn from me. You seem to have it all together. I want to talk a little bit about the biggest lesson I've learned about what words can do in the world. And I loved writing and words since I started to read them. You know, when I was in junior high school, I would go out behind the pond behind our house and like write my terrible little poetry. And when I was about your age, I was the chaplain of GIFTY, which was Nifty Gur, I think is what we call that now. And so I was writing, you know, services for my peers, which sounds like some of you also do. I learned after I was sexually assaulted, the power of telling my story and speaking out in terms of reclaiming my power and insisting on changing that narrative and coming back into myself after that really dehumanizing experience. And I also know what it feels like to move crowds and get them to love you as a slam poet, right? Like there are so many different things we can do with words. But the lesson that stood out to me the most when I sort of got this charge was the story of Yes Means Yes, the book Yes Means Yes coming into the world. It started as an article that I wrote in response to a brouhaha. So this was, 10 years ago. And an article appeared in a women's feminist website about how women were like taking on too much risk by going to ladies' nights where, the alcohol is free for women and getting themselves raped, basically. And the article did not address the idea there that we're rapists, right? And a lot of Sturm und Drang happened in the feminist blogosphere. If you don't know what the feminist blogosphere was, ask your parents. Sort of free Facebook and Twitter. And I wound up writing a piece about how we can talk about alcohol and rape without blaming women. And one thing led to another, and that led to this opportunity to work with Jessica Valenti on the anthology that became Yes Means Yes. And when that opportunity came to me, I thought it was the biggest opportunity I'd ever had, but I also didn't have wild plans for it, right? I thought, oh my God, we'll get to make this thing, we'll get to amplify the voices of people we really look up to and admire their writing and their opinions. We get to say some things ourselves. Maybe this book will come out and will influence some people like in our circles of influence, and it will make little ripples out into the world, and that would be lovely if it were just like a feminist anthology that some people read. Like that's amazing. I could have my name on a book, right? And so we just did it as a passion project, right? We didn't do it because we thought we were going to change the world. We just did it because we had stuff to say, and we knew other people had stuff to say, and that there was this whole conversation happening that we just wanted to put out into the larger world because it was important. And then we put it out, and it blew up. And that's not going to happen every time you put your writing in the world, and certainly I put tons of writing into the world that has not done that. But it was really tremendous to learn in that particular way. There's that whole dance like nobody's watching little cliche. Well, my advice to you is to write like nobody's reading, but then make everybody read it. And that's what we did with Yes Means Yes. And so a couple of years later, after that happened, I saw an article that some people in California were introducing a bill called the Yes Means Yes bill, trying to get affirmative consent to have to be the rule on all college campuses that accepted state money, which is basically all of them. And I thought, wow, isn't that cool? That will never pass, but that's wonderful. But then it passed, and it's law in California now, and it's law in New York. And they named it that because they read my book, right? So, you don't know what your words are going to do once you put them out there, right? All you know is what you can put on the page, right? Like what you can do with them, that you wish them the best, right? That you sharpen them and you work on them. And one of the things I want to say is like, especially when we're talking about writing for social justice or activism, DeCuno, I think that sometimes obsessing about craft gets sort of right, and the important thing is to just sort of yell loudly. But I'm a real believer in craft. I went and got my master's in creative writing, right? Like I think it's really important to make your words sing as best as you can, right? So I want you to care not just about what you're saying, but how you're saying it. Because the power of words is democratic, right? So in addition to all that wonderful stuff that came from publishing Yes Means Yes has been a world of harassment and abuse that I won't get into in detail here, but people also hurt me with their words, and it has opened that up. We've also seen, we're also in a moment where, our president and the people around him are making it seem like words don't matter, right? Like they can say whatever, and that suddenly like meaning is in this shifting place. And so it's super important because words are democratic in that way, right? Like they're a power that's available to everyone, that we get really good at using them, So invest in your craft, practice, take criticism. It's the hardest thing, and it sounds like you guys got great practice with each other. One of the best ways to learn about taking criticism is to also become a critic and become an editor. And I love that you practice that with each other. It's hard, and when I was a more green writer, I always was like, oh, I wish I could just publish what I wanted and not have to deal with editors. And now that I have lived a little, I'm always like, oh, thank God I have an editor, right? Like, thank God I can just write all this mess down, and then someone can help me sort it out and make it better, right? Like, make it more powerful. So accept those collaborations. Really form a relationship with language. Words are at best like a leaky and unruly vessel for meaning, right? You can never, I'm sure all of you have struggled with this, like you have this perfect idea of what you want to say, and then like making the words do it in that way that you feel it and think it, it's nearly impossible, right? And so each time I put something on the page, I'm like, oh, well, it's almost right? Like maybe it's a B+, right? And that's tough, but that's what working with words is like. And all I can say is like, you can asymptotically approach meaning, right? Like you can just get as closer and closer and closer, but you're probably never gonna touch it, what you really, really feel on the inside, because words are, there's a little distance there. Okay, where am I? You have to, the other thing I want to say, and you also seem to not need me to tell you this, is that you also have to have something to say, right? So there are a lot of hot takes in the world right now. I also encourage you to sort of spend time thinking, right? And maybe talking privately with each other or people that you trust, and listening and reading and taking in other things, and also just going out and having life experiences. If you use these words and you don't have that meaning behind it, right? You're just sort of like spilling your power for no reason, right? So it's so important both to have that craft part and to sort of really have that relationship with language and work hard on the craft, but it's equally, if not more important, to know why you want to say something. Not just for the clicks and the likes and the applause. Social media it really is that like adrenaline rush sugar hit. And I'm not gonna be like, oh, social media is so bad. Like, social media has changed the world in a lot of great ways too, right? The internet is just gasoline, right? It just pours an accelerant on all of our human impulses. So, but it is easy to get caught up in that feeling of like, oh, I'm gonna write whatever's gonna get attention. And when you get that feeling, that's a good cue to step back and think, maybe I need to take a break. I used to, as I mentioned, be a slam poet. Also ask your parents if you don't know what that is. And what?
We've got some slam poets in the group.
Oh, do we? Excellent. I didn't know slam poetry was still happening. That's awesome. Yeah. We will talk later. And I stopped doing it when I realized I was writing for the judges, right? And slam poetry is you perform poetry and then their judges pick from the audience and they give you a score. And when I realized that when I was writing something, I was like, oh, this will get them to like score me higher. I was like, I need to stop doing this, right? Because it's fine, it's important, and I hear that maybe you need a little nudging about self-promoting. So I don't want to tell you not to be self-promotional. If you don't hustle yourself, no one's going to do it for you, right? If you don't advocate for your words and think they're important and tell people they're important, no one's going to do it for you. But when you get that cart before the horse, that's when you need to stop and take a step back. Well, they're all important. You also need to be willing to be brave. And I don't just mean because the world is scary and people will say hateful things to you, although that's true. You're going to disagree with each other some of the time. You're going to find yourself in a place where you're thinking, wait, everyone's saying this thing over here, the people I trust, the people whose opinions I believe in, and I see it this completely different way. And those are really important moments to speak up. And you can speak up respectfully. You don't have to tell everyone they're garbage. But when you are, zagging, when everyone's zigging, that's a sign that your voice is actually needed in the conversation. And there have been so many times when I've not done that, and I've regretted it because I've thought, oh, well, all these people I respect think this other thing, I must be wrong. And there have been times when I've not, and I've stepped up and I've said, no, I'm just going to say this thing even though I think everyone's going to yell at me. And those are the times, most of the time, when I've heard from people who've said, oh my God, thank God, I thought I was the only one, right? If you're having that experience, lots of other people are having that experience too. Be brave with your opinions. If the people in authority or the people you respect are doing one thing, that doesn't mean they're right. We're all fallible. But that also means you're fallible, and once in a while when you do that, people are going to yell at you and you're going to take stock and realize you were wrong. And so accountability is also important, right? It's okay to screw up. It's important to screw up. It hurts to screw up publicly, especially. I have done it in spectacular fashion. What you want to do is stop. If everyone's saying like, oh, you said this terrible thing, stop and think about it, right? Are they right? Where are they coming from, right? Are these people who are trying to silence me, or are these people I've harmed, right? So you want to think about power dynamics. You want to think about what the motives of those people might be, and be honest with yourself. Have a friend, have an accountability friend who you can call up and be like, everyone's yelling at me about this thing. Like, what do you think? And talk it over. And if you figure out, if you think you've been wrong, stand up and say, I'm sorry, and here's what I'm going to do to make it better. So you can also use your words for the power of an apology. If you don't want to screw up, you'll never take those risks. So you have to be prepared for that as well. Finally, the most important thing is to not stop, right? So you may get exhausted and want to take a break, right? Take a vacation from it. Go into your bed and cry, or go to the beach and forget about everything, or go in a different direction with your life for a while. But never stop speaking up, right? Taking a break and stopping are really different things. We're in a critical moment as a planet, I think. And there are a lot of people who think they have the answers. We need you. I hope you're not just the future. I hope you're the present, because we need you. I couldn't need you more. I feel so encouraged having listened to you today, because I feel like, oh, I'm not alone, right? Like, I'm not alone. We need to raise each other up, to hold each other accountable, to collaborate, to not be, as much as possible, to not be competitive, right? When somebody gets some kind of attention that you wish you were getting, or an award or praise or that sort of thing, it can make us feel competitive. Oh, I'm so bad. But like, be aware of that too. This is a crucial moment, and the voices that rise to the top right now are going to make all of the difference, right? We're in like a geopolitically critical moment. And your voices, if your voices were running the world, I would feel like we were in amazing shape. So, when I say all this stuff to you, it's also because I want your voices to reach their maximum power. And if there's something I can do to help you with that, I mean that quite directly, you should drop me a line and let me help you. At my website, there's a contact form. It literally just goes to me. Just email me and say, we met, blah, 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 and let's do this. It's going to take all of us putting our egos aside, but also stepping into our power. And that's kind of a trick, right? Like, there's a difference between your full power that comes from your gut and your feet being planted on the ground, and that full force of your backbone and your conviction and your deeply held beliefs and your spirituality, and that sort of ego power that's like, yes, I am the best. And there's nothing wrong with feeling like that, but we need to not get confused about those two. We all need to be standing in our full power and raising our voices to their full volume if we're going to get through this together. I'm going to leave you with the advice that I give to every group of activists that I speak with, which probably you all are quite familiar with, because it comes from the Pirkei Avot. Rabbi Tarfon says, "It is not your duty to complete the work, but neither is it yours to desist from it." So you individually, none of us are obligated to save the world, to fix the world. But together, we all have to do it. And I couldn't be any more grateful to be in the work with you. So thank you all so much.
Wow. Jacqueline, thank you so much for inspiring all of us today, for proving that words can make a difference, and for being a resource to our fellows. Thank you again so much for being here. So now is the moment, it's the time, it's here. Our fellows are going to officially graduate from the Rising Voices Fellowship. So Mickey and I are going to be handing out certificates, and also each fellow got to pick out a JWA t-shirt as our parting gift to them. And before I did just want to just to read what's on the flyer so everyone knows, since there are people in the back who can't really see. So the Rising Voices Fellowship Certificate of Completion presented this day, June 4th, 2017, to whoever. Mazel tov on exploring your identity, developing your voice, and leading by example. So I'm going to have Mickey hand me each one. I will read your name, come up, and then we'll line up for photos. Yes. Oh. Hannah Himmelgreen. Isabel Kirsch. Maya Jodidio. Eden Olsberg. Abigail Fisher. Diana Myers. Lily Clayman. Elisa Abish-Magder. Madison Siegel. Molly Pifko. Rachel Tess Kelly. No. Sorry. And of course, Katie Ronkin. And of course, Sarah. And of course, Sarah, who's up here. So we'll snap a quick photo and then let everyone sit down. Yeah.
Oh, we could do the photo after.
Yeah. Okay. See y'all.
Okay, well, I really have very few words to say that haven't been said, and I'm so grateful for everyone's presence here today to celebrate this incredible cohort of young women. I've been so inspired by them this whole year, just remembering back to when we did all of the initial interviews over Skype and got to know each person a little bit, and just how much we've seen them grow over this year has been incredible. So I just want to say a few thank yous before we close today. Of course, all of the fellows for their incredible commitment. It's not a small commitment, this program. It's really a lot of work, a lot of hours that they put into the writing and the editing process. So I'm just incredibly impressed by that. I'm not sure if we have a few alumni in the room, so just want to recognize them. As Judith mentioned, mentioned, it's really important to us that we continue to welcome our fellows as they graduate into the JWA community and keep everyone as part of our family. So it's wonderful to have you also interning with us, so that's great. So all of the family and friends who came to support the fellows, just want to say thank you again for coming all this way. For celebrating with us today, Jacqueline, for your remarks and just for being such an amazing role model for these girls. I'm sure they're all fangirling as much as the staff and hopefully everyone else in the audience. Andover Newton Theological Seminary for hosting us. I want to just thank Steve and Cisco for doing photography and video. And the JWA staff and interns, just raise your hands who are here because this event is really put on by. And I wanted to say, actually, sorry, this is an awkward moment. This is supposed to be here, out here, but I want to call up Larissa. Larissa is like literally the heart and soul of the Rising Voices Fellowship. She reads the fellows posts, she edits them, she puts in countless hours and so much love and care. It's an honor to work with her, and I'm so proud of her, and it's been wonderful to see her grow this year as well. So. I wanted to give one more shout out. I know Judith mentioned there are programs with some more information about JWA and ways to get involved if you're interested on the seats, but also feel free to talk to any of the staff after if you're interested, and please eat food. Take food with you. We would like to leave without any food. So thank you all again so much and congratulations. And if the fellows can actually come up to the front, we are going to do a couple of group shots. You can leave those on your seats actually. And Jacqueline, if you could come. Probably take off our
I was like so blown away by them. I lucked lost my. My arms are so short that I can't. I can barely selfie myself.
No, it's really impressive.
Yeah, it's like really like the same we're really lucky to get to work with them.
We'll do one and then maybe we'll do
Yeah, totally. Oh wait, that's okay.
Guys, are you ready?
You're gonna get it.